Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at TKT Unit 24, Selection and Use of Coursebook Materials. In this unit, we will discuss how teachers choose teaching materials and what they need to consider before using them in the classroom. We will also look at how to adapt materials when they are not fully suitable for a particular group of learners, level, or teaching context. By the end, you should have a clearer idea of how to select materials effectively and make them more appropriate for your students. So, let's get started. When we say coursebook materials, we mean all the different parts of a coursebook package that we use in the classroom. We use these materials to present language, to give learners practice, and to help them develop their language skill. A typical coursebook package usually has several components. First, there is the student book, which learners use in class and often at home. Then there is the teacher book, which gives guidance, extra ideas, and support for the teachers. Most modern coursebook packages also include audio or video recordings. Along with these, the teacher book often provides a tape script, audio script, or transcript. This is the written version of exactly what learners hear on the recordings and is very useful for follow-up activities, checking comprehensions, and focusing on the language. In addition, many packages include a workbook or activity book. This usually contains extra practice material for homework or self-study. Sometimes there may also be digital components such as a CD-ROM, resources for an interactive whiteboard, or extra material on a website. So, when we talk about coursebook materials, we are not just talking about one book, but a whole set of tools designed to support teaching and learning in different ways. Now, let's look at how teachers select their teaching materials, whether that is a coursebook or extra supplementary materials. Teachers don't usually choose materials at random. They often base their choice on a need analysis. This means they study their learner level, their language need, and their interest. To do this, they might use a questionnaire, interview, or diagnostic test. All of this information helps the teacher build a class profile. A class profile is a description of all the learners in the class. It shows what the learners have in common and also how they differ from each other in terms of level, needs, and preferences. Once the teacher has this class profile, their task is to select the materials that best match it. In other words, the needs analysis and class profile guide the teachers to choose the most appropriate material for that particular group of learners. Now, let's talk about some key questions we should ask ourselves when selecting teaching material. Sometimes we can't choose the coursebook itself, but we can still decide which parts of it to use and how to use them. These decisions depend on the answers to several questions. The first question is the material visually attractive and clear? For example, does the page use clear heading, colors, and fonts so learner can easily see where an exercise starts and finishes? If a reading text is printed in a tiny, crowded font with no pictures, learner may struggle to focus or to understand the context. The second question is the material well organized? Can you and your learners follow the logic of the unit and find your way around it quickly? Imagine a listening activity where the instructions, the questions, and the text script are all on different pages. If learners keep flipping back and forth and get confused, and the organization isn't very helpful. Next, we should ask, is it culturally appropriate and familiar enough for your learners? For example, imagine a coursebook unit about Western-style dating, that is, going out for dinner, going to the cinema together, or talking openly about boyfriends and girlfriends. For learners in Myanmar, this topic could be quite sensitive, since dating and romantic relationships are often considered a private or delicate subject and not something that is openly discussed, especially in a classroom setting. In that case, a teacher might need to change the context or replace the text with something more neutral and culturally comfortable. For example, a text about friendship, family relationships, or celebrating a festival together. Another important question is it suitable for young learners' age, needs, and interests? A unit about job interviews might work really well for adult learners, but be far less relevant for a group of teenagers. A unit about school life or social media, on the other hand, might connect with them much more. We should also ask, will the topic actually motivate your learners? A topic like travel and holidays might get adult learners talking enthusiastically about their own experiences, while a very technical take on banking could easily borrow a general English class. Then there is a question of level. Is the material pitched at the right level? Does it give learners a clear enough context or clear enough explanation to understand new language? If a grammar explanation is packed with terminology learners don't know yet, they simply won't follow it. So you might need to simplify it or add a few extra examples. And finally, does the material give learners enough opportunity to actually use the language? A unit that's full of gap-filled exercises but has no speaking tasks won't help learners practice real communications. In that case, adding some pair work, role plays, or discussion questions can make a big difference. So, if the answer to any of these questions is no, we have two main options. We can either replace the coursebook material with something that serves the same purpose, a text or activity from another book, a teacher website, or other supplementary resources. Or we can adapt the coursebook material itself, changing it in some way to make it more suitable for our learners. Now, let's look at different ways to adapt teaching material when they do not perfectly match your lesson aim, or your classroom situations. Remember, a coursebook is a source, not a fixed lesson plan. As teachers, we can change, adjust, and personalize material to make them more effective. There are 6 ways to adapt material: extending material, shortening material, changing the methodology, changing the level of material, recording material, and making greater use of available resources in the book. Let's look at each one with examples. The first strategy is extending material. So we use this when an activity is too short, learners need more practice, or the language part has not been practiced enough. The solution is to add extra items that follow the same patterns. For example, imagine a coursebook has a grammar exercise with only 5 gap-filled sentences practicing the past simple tense, as you can see on the slide. And you think your learners need more practice, then you can create 5 more similar sentences. The second strategy is shortening materials. We use this when an activity is too long, learners already understand the language, or there is not enough time in the lesson. You do not always need to complete every exercise in the book. You can select only the parts that are useful. For example, if a listening activity has 3 sections, but your lesson time is limited, you could use only 1 or 2 sections. You could also divide material among learners. For example, give different groups different parts of a long text and ask them to share the information afterward. The third strategy is changing the methodology. Sometimes the material itself is useful, but the way learners are expected to use it does not work well. Maybe your learners need more interactions, more movement, more creativity, or simply a change of pace. The solution is to change the way students complete the task. For example, a coursebook activity asks students to match vocabulary words with definition individually. Instead, you could turn it into mingling activities. Give each student either a word or a definition. Student walks around the classroom and they ask questions and find their matching partner. The fourth strategy is changing the level of material. Sometimes material is too easy or too difficult for your learners. Instead of replacing it, you can adjust the level of challenge. To make material more difficult, you can add extra questions or ask students to predict answers before readings. For example, before students read a text about climate change, ask them to predict the main ideas from the title and pictures. This requires more thinking. To make material easier, you can simplify instructions or provide vocabulary support or divide a large task into smaller steps. For example, if students have to read a long article, you can divide it into 3 shorter sections and check understanding after each part. The fifth strategy is reordering material. Sometimes the problem is not the content, but the order in which activities appears. Coursebooks often follow a fixed sequence, but your learners may benefit from a different order. The solution is simply to change the sequence. For example, a coursebook lesson might follow this order: read the text, learn new vocabulary, answer questions. However, you might decide to introduce vocabulary first because your students need those words before they can understand the text. Another example is if a grammar explanation comes before practice, you could start with example first and ask students to discover the rules themselves. You can also hide parts of the page or cover sections so students focus only on the activity you want them to complete. The sixth strategy is making use of all the resources available in the book. Sometimes a unit does not provide enough practice or students need revision. In this case, teacher can use extra resources that are already included. For example, many coursebooks contain grammar summary, vocabulary list, pronunciation sections, irregular verb table, review activities. You can use these for extra practice. For example, after teaching the past tense, students can use the irregular verb list to create sentences with the given verbs. You can also create activities using the whole book. For example, ask students to find 3 examples of passive voice in previous unit. This helps learners recycle language and become more independent. Now it's time to practice what you have learned about selecting and using coursebook materials. Match question 1 to 6 with the correct teaching purposes A to G. Remember, there is one extra option you do not need to use. Pause the video and complete the task. When you finish, check your answer using the answer key in the YouTube descriptions. If you found this video helpful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos on TKT. Thank you for watching this video lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson. Happy teaching and happy learning.